Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Richa Chakrabarti, and I am an Education Support Manager at ACCA. Our session today is designed to support your preparation for Advanced Audit and Assurance paper, and I am very pleased to be joined by our expert tutor, Ben Wilson.
Thanks, Richa. So welcome, everybody. My name's Ben Wilson. I'm the ACCA's expert tutor for the AAA exam paper. So a little bit of background about me and why the ACCA work with me as their expert tutor. I started my career as an auditor working at KPMG in London. So I've got practical experience of auditing, what it's like in the real world. I used to have some really interesting audit clients. My favorite one was the BBC. I used to work on that audit for a couple of months of the year. I've been teaching, lecturing for the last 15 years or so, primarily focused on auditing. And I work with an organization called FME Learn Online. We provide personalized small group tutoring to students to give them the best possible chance of passing the particular ACCA paper that they're sitting. I've worked as both an audit examiner and as an audit exam marker. So I've got real experience of writing the exam papers and also grading them, which gives me a lot of insight into the things that really work. And what I've tried to do, particularly in the debrief section of this webinar and the marking section, is I'll be trying to give you as much of my insight as possible from my experience as an examiner and a marker to give you the best chance of passing AAA. So our agenda for today, we're going to go through a few common issues that students have with AAA, and I'm going to give you my advice on how to overcome those issues. We're then going to focus on the new professional skills. So as you probably already know, 20% of the marks in the AAA exam are now going to be for demonstrating these professional skills. So I'm going to give you some advice on how to earn those marks. We're then going to go through a question from the specimen paper. It's question 3, part A from that specimen paper, which you may have already seen the question because it is up on the ACCA's practice platform. And if you haven't already done the specimen paper, I'd recommend that as part of your final exam preparation because it's the new style with the 20 professional skills marks in it, and it'll be fantastic final exam practice for you. We're then going to do a marking exercise. We're going to take 2 student scripts. These are dummy student scripts, but 2 student scripts for that question 3, part A, and we're going to go through and grade them, both for technical marks and for the professional skills marks. And these 2 scripts, one of them's great, so there's going to be a lot of things in there that will say, yeah, do this kind of thing that the student has done because it'll earn you marks. And one of them is not so good. And we'll be trying to avoid the pitfalls of that second script, but we'll be marking that together in the session. And then I'll go through a few free resources that are available to you that will help you in your final exam preparation. And then there's a Q&A session at the end. Now, if you've got questions as we're going through the session, just put them in the Q&A panel, and the team at ACCA will work behind the scenes and answer as many of those questions as possible. What often happens, though, in these sessions is that students wait until right at the end and then ask loads of questions, and there isn't time for the team to respond. So if you have a question, get it in early, because then you've got a better chance of it being answered. Right, common issues with AAA and how you can overcome them. The first of these is that students say they're not ready to practice exam questions. I need to do more study. I need to memorize the textbook because I'm not ready to sit exam questions. And the reason that's a problem for AAA is that this is not a knowledge-based exam. This is not an exam where you need to memorize the textbook and then regurgitate what you have memorized. This is a practical exam. This is an exam that tests your auditing skills. So you have to practice exam questions if you are going to have a decent chance of passing this exam paper. So my advice to you, even if you don't feel ready, the best preparation you can do for this exam is to practice past exam questions. And if you have an issue in that question, there's an area that you don't know your technical knowledge on, then go back to your notes and refresh your memory of that technical area. But do it that way round. Practice the questions and then fill any knowledge gaps, rather than I must memorize everything before I practice questions. Now, I always get students saying the examiner's answers are massive. They're really technical. They're so long. I can't possibly write that much in the exam, but I have to because the examiner is telling me that's what I need to do. Why would they publish these answers that are so long and so technical if I wasn't supposed to write like that in the exam? Now, the examiner's answers are there as a reference tool. They're the best answer you could possibly write if you had, I don't know, 20 hours to do this exam paper, and there was a team of you doing it, reviewing each other's work. You can't possibly write like the examiner. You need to be realistic. Okay? You can write way less than the examiner writes in their model answer, and you're going to see that in the debrief video I'm going to be showing you shortly in this session. So you don't have to write anywhere near as much as the examiner does. And I strongly advise you, if you're working with a training provider, to make full use of any marking facility that they provide you. On my course, I take in loads of work for marking and give the students advice on how to improve their answers, because nobody writes like the examiner. It's not possible in the time that you have. If you've bought one of the official ACCA exam kits, so from BPP or from Kaplan, it can feel overwhelming because there's loads of questions in there. If you worked full-time on study between now and the exam, you would struggle to get through all of those questions. And you don't need to do all of them to pass. One of my students in March scored 81% in the real exam, a guy called Michael Baker, and Michael did about 20 questions as his preparation for the exam, which feels like it's not enough, doesn't it? But what Michael did is he worked smart. Okay? He did the questions that I advised him to, which covered all of the common question types that come up in the exam, and he squeezed as much learning as possible out of each question. So he did them all fully, planning his answer, writing up his answers to time, to develop his exam technique skills, and then a lot of them he had marked, and others he also then went through the examiner's answer so that he could see areas that he'd missed, and crucially, he kept a log of things that he missed in questions or development points. So by doing that and reflecting fully on each question he practiced, he squeezed as much learning as possible out of a relatively small number of questions. That would be what I'd advise you to do, rather than trying to do every question and whizzing through them. I should have put this first, because this is the worst thing you can possibly do. I know lots of students do it. Okay, you look at the question and go, oh, that's tough. And also, it's boring to have to actually work through this question. What I'll do is I'll read through the question, then I'll go and read the examiner's answer, and I'll read through it and I go, oh, I would have put that. Oh, yeah, I would have put that. Oh, I would have put that one as well. And then you're done with the question. The problem of that, of going through and just reading the examiner's answer, is you're not developing your exam technique skills. You have to see each question that you practice in AAA as a problem-solving exercise. You're not supposed to know the full answer, but you're supposed to develop the skill of going through and picking out what the easy marks are. And you can only develop that skill if you practice it. Okay, we're now going to focus on the 20 professional skills marks that have come in to the AAA exam. A fifth of the exam paper. Right? This is a really big change. In the past, there were only 4 professional skills marks, and now there's 20. Right? This is a massive change to the exam, and you need to be prepared for it. Now, the professional skills marks, I'm sure you already know this, but in case you're hearing about this for the first time, the first of them, they're for communication skills. Okay? And this will be 4 marks, if you can see my fingers, 4 marks in the case study question, in the 50 marker in section A. And these marks should be relatively easy for you to earn. The first of them is for you having the right structure. So, briefing notes, to, from, date, subject, a brief introduction that summarizes the requirements, and subtitles throughout the risk section of your answer and also any longer parts of the question. So 4 things for you to do to earn that 1 communication mark. It's quite a lot. Then the other 3 marks are, one of them is for following the instructions in the question. So it will tell you not to do something. Don't do risks to do with foreign exchange. And it will tell you, do calculate materiality based on profit before tax. And by following those instructions, you will get a professional skills mark for communication. So that's 2 of them. The third one is for the clarity of your language, professional language. So you're not using overly familiar terms. The tone is professional throughout your answer. That's the third one. And then the fourth one, this one's a bit more vague and a bit harder to earn. Okay, this one is for an effective answer. What is an effective answer? Well, it's one that answers the full question, so you answer all parts of the requirement, and it's one that uses the scenario information effectively. So your answer should be based on facts from the scenario. So those are the 4 communication skills marks just in section A. Analysis and evaluation, we will see these professional skills marks in all 3 questions, okay? The 50 marker and the 225 markers. And generally what these analysis and evaluation marks are for is, number 1, doing calculations and commenting on your numbers. Number 2, for developing your points, for asking that so what question, for developing implications. If it's an evaluation question, you'll get some marks, some credit for having a conclusion. So after your section, to have a concluding comment. And for having a balanced argument. So for something to be an evaluation, it can't be one-sided. You need to say both the good things and the bad things. Skepticism and judgment marks, we will see these in every question. So the case study and both of your section B questions, both 25 markers. This is for questioning with authority. So saying that something appears to be incorrect because it contradicts another piece of information that I'm given. So one of the numbers I'm given might contradict some of the narrative information. They might tell me in the forecast that revenue is going to grow by 20%. But in the description, in the narrative, it tells me that we've lost our biggest 3 clients. And you would say, well, it doesn't make sense that revenue grows by 20% when we've lost our biggest 3 clients. I would expect that revenue would actually fall. And for making that point, you would earn a skepticism mark. You'll also get skepticism marks for talking about things like missing information. I would expect this information to be here, but it's not. And we'll get judgment marks, particularly in the first question, for prioritizing our points. In the risk question, you need to put your most important 2 audit risks first and explain why they're the most important audit risks for you to get that judgment mark. Commercial acumen, we won't see this in every question. It will be in section A, and it will sometimes be in section B. And we'll get commercial acumen marks, for example, in a business risk question for linking a business risk back to the company's strategic goals. Or think in an acceptance question for thinking about the impact on the auditor's reputation. or thinking about the size of the audit fee. Is it significant enough to cover the amount of work that we need to do and the risk of the engagement? So making commercially relevant points will score you marks, not in every question, but they will be clear in the exam which questions do have commercial acumen in them. So I would say, hands down, categorically, this is good news for you. These professional skills marks, if you know what you're doing, should be relatively easy to earn. Easier to earn than some of the more technical, harder marks around technical financial reporting, for example. So the reasons I think it's good news. Firstly, double marking. I mean, who doesn't like to get marked twice for making the same point? Now, the point I gave you earlier, the example I gave with revenue growing by 20%, but losing our biggest 3 clients, that would give you a professional skepticism mark. But it would also give you a technical mark for answering the question. Because the question would be, evaluate the forecast. And that would be a way of you saying, I don't think the forecast is right. So through answering the question and earning technical marks, you very often earn the professional skills marks for the same point. So that's good news. We've now got more time. Now, the exam is still 3 hours and 15 minutes, but you now only have 80 marks worth of technical questions to answer. Okay, there's less requirements for you to do, and the scenarios are going to be a little bit smaller. So the way I do my timings in AAA, and I advise my students to do this, is use 3 hours of the exam. You plan to use 3 hours of the exam, and then the 15 minutes is buffer time for something to go wrong. Now, using that 3 hours to answer the exam paper gives you 2.25 minutes per technical mark. So an hour and a half for question 1, that's 40 marks, 40 technical marks, and the rest of the time, so 45 minutes for question 2, 45 minutes for question 3, for 20 technical marks. So that's 2.25 minutes per technical mark. Under the old setup, it used to be 1.8 minutes per technical. So you now have more time to construct your answer. My screen is frozen a little bit. There we go. These marks are, the professional skills marks are going to be awarded holistically. And what does holistically mean? Well, it means that the marker is going to form an overall impression of your answer and judge whether you have done enough to earn these professional skills marks. Now, that means there's more opportunity for you to impress the marker and to earn the marks. It's not like you have to say one specific thing to earn these marks. And the last of my points is around headroom. Although in, say, in Section A, there are only 10 professional skills marks, there are actually 15 available, or maybe even 16 available, because there's more of these professional skills marks available than the total that will be awarded. So you don't have to do every professional skill perfectly to earn the maximum number of professional skills marks. So again, that should be good news. Right, my top tips for you around professional skills. Firstly, make sure that you follow the instructions. Okay, answer the specific question that has been asked. Follow any guidance you're given about ignoring certain items or focusing on certain items. You must answer the specific question. You've got to use the scenario fully. Every point in AAA should be based on a fact from the scenario that you then analyze, and that will earn you analysis and evaluation marks. And make sure you develop your points fully. Through doing that, again, you'll earn skepticism and analysis and evaluation marks. So asking yourself the question, so what? What does this really mean for the business going forward? And finally, don't worry about this. Okay? If you are answering the question and fully developing your points, you will earn these professional skills marks without even really trying. So my advice for you is to just focus on the technical marks and show good exam technique, and you will get these professional skills marks without even really trying. Okay, that's it for the first section of this presentation. We're now going to go through a question from the specimen paper. This is available to you on the ACCA's practice platform. So if you've looked at this already, great. If you haven't, don't worry. We're going to work through this question together. And I've pre-recorded this debrief so that if there's any tech issues, that's less likely to happen or be an issue. So we're now going to watch this video together. Here we are in the practice platform, looking at the specimen paper that's valid from September 22 onwards, and I've navigated directly to question 3, which is the one we're going to be working through here. We're just looking at part A of this question. So my first thing I do always, any question I'm working on, is I open up the word processor, because I'm going to make notes in here that are going to help me for planning. And I'm just resizing it so that I can read all of the information in the preamble and add any general notes that are going to be relevant to answering the question. I don't actually know what the question is yet, but there's certain things that are going to be useful no matter what the question is. And I'd never like to just read when I'm doing a AAA question. I always like to be active and plan as I'm reading. So I'm told today's date. So it's the 1st of July. That's going to be relevant for, well, whatever the question is. That's where we are now. And we're doing the audit of a listed company. Fine, that's also going to be relevant, whatever the question is. And we're at completion for the year ended 31st of March X5. So we're 3 months after year end, and we are at the completion phase. And that really important that you are making comments that are relevant to the particular phase of the audit. It's something the examiner always comments on. Students often don't make comments relevant to the phase of the audit. So because we are at completion, that means the audit work has been done. And what we're doing now is going over that audit work, doing things like a subsequent events review, analytical procedures, to make sure that we're comfortable that the evidence on the file supports the audit opinion that we're going to be giving. The audit report is due to be signed in a few weeks, so the audit report has not yet been signed. Tells me that they publish the activity is the publication of trade and scientific journals. Nothing that interesting there. These figures are given to me. Why are they giving it? Well, it's strange. They're giving me all these individual figures that looks like I need to do materiality calculations, but then they tell me that materiality is 0.5 million. So I'm definitely adding that in. That's a critical figure for my plan. But dollars, 0.5 million. But why are they telling me all of these individual numbers as well? Sometimes it's because they've moved massively. Like revenue might have fallen off a cliff, and instead of but here actually it's a slight increase in revenue, a slight increase in profits, and a slight increase in assets. Almost like these numbers aren't going to be used for anything because they give me the materiality figure. But I know the examiner doesn't give numbers for no reason. I'm just going to copy and paste those into my answer, general notes, just because I know they're probably going to be useful at some point. So I want to have them there. I don't want to forget about them. Then it tells me I'm given 2 exhibits and I should answer the requirements within the response option. Obviously, I should do that. Right, next stage is to open up the requirement. And I'm resizing this so that it's on the left-hand side of my screen with my answer plan on the right-hand side of the screen so that I can kind of work on both together side by side. And look, I've left a bit of room here so that I can open other exhibits as well as and when I need them, rather than covering the whole screen with the requirements. So that's good practice in terms of managing your screen. Right, we are just looking at part A here, which is 10 marks. So I always start by copying and pasting the requirement into my answer plan. And how annoying, the formatting goes all over the place. Now, what I do is I now review these requirements and kind of paraphrase them a little bit so that I really understand what I'm supposed to do, and I make sure I answer all parts. So completion matters to be considered. That's one part of this question. And recommend actions before the audit report can be signed. So part 1 actually has 2 sections to it. And then part 2, evaluate the implications if no adjustments are made to the financial statements. Now, because I want to make this easy for you to follow, I'm going to do a little bit of formatting here, bolding and underlining, so it's clearer to you what is structure and what is answer. In the real exam, I'd only do this if I had a little bit of spare time at the end. This is 10 marks. And a note to myself, that means I've got something like 22.5 minutes to do this question, this part of the question. I don't need to include that in my answer. That's there for your purposes. The reason it's 22.5 marks, well, this entire question is 25 marks. And that makes it 1/4 of the exam paper. 1/4 of the exam paper is 45 minutes. And this question, 10 marks, is half of the question because we don't assign any specific time to the professional skills marks. So half of the time for this question is 22.5 minutes. My timings there, by the way, are based on you spending 3 hours doing the questions and leaving 15 minutes as buffer time for something to go wrong. Perhaps normally that actually is in the first question, the 50 marker, so I can overrun on time a little bit there. The other way of getting to that 22.5 minutes is it's 2.25 minutes per mark. So 10 marks times 2.25 minutes gets me to 22.5. Now, for this part of the question, for part A, I'm just supposed to be using Exhibit 1. So let's open Exhibit 1 up, and I'm going to resize it so that it is on this side of the screen. I don't want it to cover over the rest of the questions, though, and exhibits in case I need to go to some of those. And let's zoom in. Actually, no, let's not zoom in a bit. I want to be able to see the full thing. There we go. Right, I'm reviewing the audit working papers and identified an issue. Myron is at the advanced stage of negotiations to sell its scientific publishing division to a competitor. So, advanced stage of negotiations, that sounds like I have a proper plan to sell it, and it's going to sell shortly after year end. I'm thinking this should be an asset held for sale. That's my first thought. So, advanced stage of negotiations. I'm already thinking immediately that this should be an asset held for sale. The division contributed revenue of 13 million and PBT of 1.4 million. So this is material, isn't it? It's material both in terms of revenue, because that's over £500,000, and it's material in terms of PBT. So this is highly material because it's 26 times materiality and 2.8 times materiality for PBT. So I've just done the 13 million divided by 0.5 and the 1.4 million divided by 0.5. Oh, there's a draft sale agreement in place and it's due to be finalised by the 1st of August. And we've got an agreed sales price of 42 million. So I'm going to add that in to this point here about the advanced stage of negotiations, which is going to drive the fact that this is an asset held for sale. Right, so I've added those points in. We've got an agreement in place, a price has been agreed, and a sale date that's in the not too distant future. So this is clearly an asset held for sale. Oh, and look, I'm selling it for 42 million. So I can add that into my materiality comment as well, can't I? It's massive, this disposal. So it's not just that the division itself is material, the proceeds are highly material at 84 times materiality. It's a separate cash generating unit. Ooh, okay, why are they telling me that? Again, that adds to the fact that this should be an asset held for sale. Let's add that into our plan. Right, none of the assets of the division have been revalued. Okay, so that's saying I don't need to worry about revaluation reserves. And why are they telling me about depreciation over the useful life of the assets? Everything is told for a reason. Oh, I know what that is. When something is an asset held for sale, we stop depreciating it. So there should be no depreciation charged on this asset from the point at which it's an asset held for sale. Right, what am I told next? The finance director of Myron has not made any disclosures with respect to the upcoming sale, as it considers it to be part of next year's accounting transactions. Well, he's kind of right. We will be accounting for this in the next financial year. But because we're at this advanced stage of negotiations, this should be a subsequent event, shouldn't it? A non-adjusting subsequent event. We should be disclosing this to a user of the financial statements because it might impact the decisions that they make about buying or selling shares in the company. It's a listed business. Because we know that this transaction is highly likely to take place in the period immediately after year end. So this isn't right. They should be making disclosures. So this is a matter to consider. Okay, so this is a non-adjusting subsequent event. The sale is likely to take place 4 months after year end. All these points about us being in advanced negotiations, I might add a bit of that in there as well. So we should be disclosing details of the sale, for example, the amount that's been agreed and who we're selling it to. So that a user of the accounts can make informed decisions about buying and selling shares in this business. Maybe I can add in here that the fact that we're a listed business, that might be relevant. That's something we're told up here. We might not want others to know about this because we're selling it to a competitor. We've got an incentive to keep this quiet. So we're a listed business. Management might have an incentive not to disclose this issue, even though they have to, because it could impact the business, like losing customers, if the sale is made public. Okay, so that's probably, I'm kind of explaining there why they've not done it. And that is me demonstrating a bit of professional skepticism and developing my point, earning analysis and evaluation points. Right. The division has been written down from its current carrying value of 45 million to its estimated value in use of 41 million in the financial statements. Now, if they've done that correctly, the value in use is 41 million, but look up here, the disposal price is 42 million. If we're going to be able to sell it for 42 million, that indicates it has a fair value of 42 million. We've written it down by too much. We should only have written it down to 42 million. Okay, that write down of 41 million is incorrect. To 41 million is incorrect. The resale value is actually higher at 42 million, which is indicating the actual fair value of the division. So my long-term assets are understated by $1 million, and the impairment expense in the SPL is overstated by 1 million. This is a material issue because it's 2 times the materiality level of 0.5 million. So we've got several issues here. They haven't disclosed this as an asset held for sale, so potentially the depreciation is material. They've not disclosed a subsequent event, and they've incorrectly accounted for a write-down. So there's several individual misstatements here because of this issue around this sale of the division. Right, what action should we take before the auditor's report can be signed? And this is really important that I take into account the phase of the audit that we're at. We're at completion. And I'm going to get, taking into account this properly, analysis and evaluation marks will be earned here on the professional skills, because I'm answering the actual question that's been set. So, because I'm at completion, I'm not going to suggest things like obtain the draft sale agreement. Why? Well, because I'll already have it. I've already done that in my audit testing phase. I'm not going to agree these figures back to the results of Myron because I've already done that during my audit testing. Why? Because we're at completion here, I need to be making comments that are specific to this phase. So what I'd be doing here is telling management that they need to make these changes. They need to to disclose it as an asset held for sale. They need to disclose this as a non-adjusting event, and they need to book this write-down incorrectly. And if they don't, then I need to report it to those charged with governance. So I'm going to discuss the required disclosures with management, that this should be an asset held for sale and it should be a non-adjusting subsequent event, and they should be making the disclosures for these things. I'll suggest that they make the required changes, explaining why they're required, the correct financial reporting, etc. And I'll detail the impact on the audit opinion if they don't make these changes. I'll also report it to those charged with governance, because they might be unaware that the finance team, the executive director, the finance director, is incorrectly accounting for things, and those charged with governance can then encourage the finance, let's not put team, but let's put director, that's probably better, to make the required changes. Lovely. How many points have we got so far? I always like to keep track of that. This is 10 marks. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points. I'm doing pretty well here already, and I've got to evaluate the implications on the audit report as well now, if no adjustments are made to the financial statements. So notice it's the report, okay, not the opinion. So it's wider things as well. It's not just, so it's the opinion, impact on the opinion, and impact on any extra paragraphs as well. So I always follow the same approach in a reporting question. I start by saying what type of issue this is. So this is a disagreement with management. So it's a disagreement with management over the correct financial reporting, and the accounts are misstated at present. I then go on and talk about the size of it. Is it material, or is it material and pervasive? Right, it's definitely material because of all the points we've made up here. Is it pervasive? Is it isolated to one issue, or does it impact several parts of the financial statements? Well, this is a bit judgmental, really. There are several misstatements here, aren't there? So there's multiple lack of disclosure. And there is also this write-down that's been done incorrectly. So multiple lack of disclosure and an incorrect figure. I mean, I'm on the fence here. This could be just material, or it could be material and pervasive. So there are multiple material issues here, 2 disclosure issues and 1 profit understatement. So it could be considered pervasive, as several areas of the financial statements are impacted, and the disposal itself is highly material by size. Now, I don't really like doing this. I'm going to be saying if here. Normally in the exam, it's very clear if it's just material or material and pervasive. But this one isn't clear. And if it is not clear, then we can use our friend, the word if. So if it's just material, then we'll have a qualified audit opinion. If it's material and pervasive, we'll have an adverse audit opinion. So if I consider it to be material, it's the auditor's judgment, then it's a qualified opinion, except for. If it's material and pervasive, then I'd be giving an adverse opinion. The accounts are not true and fair, they are materially misstated. And because this is implications for the audit report, I then go through any extra paragraphs. Now, this is not something that would be an emphasis of matter issue, because emphasis of matter is where something has been correctly disclosed, but is so big that I want to draw attention to it. It's not a material uncertainty over going concern, because this is not so big to impact going concern. Look at the profitability of the business. Maybe that's why they told me these overall figures. Even if they do book these changes, it's not going to, it's not going to make us loss making. So it's not a material uncertainty over going concern. It's not other information or other matters, because it isn't an inconsistency between the financial statements and other information presented alongside it. So what else am I left with? The basis of qualified opinion. So I would need to have an extra paragraph or changed paragraph, basis of qualified or adverse opinion, to explain why the audit opinion has been modified, and that will be placed after the audit opinion. Lovely. So I'd have a basis of qualified or adverse opinion paragraph explaining why the opinion has been modified, and that will be placed after the audit opinion. Excellent. Last high-level review. It's 10 marks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've got 12 points here. I've absolutely smashed this. So I've got more than enough in here. I don't need to go scratching around for extra points. It's time now to write this up. All right, I've just resized my screen so that you can see my typing up a little bit more easily. These general notes, I'll leave these here for now. And when it comes to having fully written this up, I'll delete this. I don't want it in my answer. But I'll leave them there for now as a little reminder, just in case I need them. So my first point here is around this being an asset held for sale, and with lots of supporting information from the scenario. Now, I quite like, good practice to have little subheadings if possible. So my subheading here is going to be asset held for sale, and I'm going to write up this point underneath. So my point's about it being an asset held for sale. Myron is at an advanced stage of negotiations with a sale agreement in place and a price has been agreed. The sale date is within the next month, the 1st of August. As this division is a separate cash generating unit, it clearly meets the definition of being an asset held for sale. The division's assets, liabilities, revenues and costs should be separately disclosed in a note to the financial statements. Myron should stop charging depreciation from the point at which it's held for sale, likely the date at which the sales price was agreed. Lovely, that's those points written up nicely and fully. Next point here is about materiality. So I'll have a subheading for material. Right, the division is highly material with revenues of 26 times materiality, PBT of 2.8 times materiality, and the disposal proceeds are hugely material at 84 times materiality. Next point is around this being a non-adjusting subsequent event. So that'll be my subheading, and I'm going to write up these points about we should be disclosing this and explaining why management might have decided not to. Right, this sale is likely to take place 4 months after year end. Given the materiality of the disposal, the decisions of a user of the accounts, for example, to buy and sell shares as Myron is listed, look at that nice depth point I've added there, earning me an analysis and evaluation, professional skills mark. Those decisions could be impacted if they are aware of the disposal. To allow informed decisions to be made by a user of the accounts, details of the sale should be disclosed. For example, the likely date, sales proceeds, and buyer. As the disposal is commercially sensitive, we're selling to a rival, management have an incentive not to disclose it. It could impact the business, for example, losing customers if details of the sale are made public. Regardless, a user of the accounts should be informed. Nice. Right, last one then is about the write-down that's been done incorrectly. So let's write that point up. Okay, the write-down then. The division's been written down to its value in use of 41 million. This is incorrect, as the resale value is higher at 42 million, indicating the actual fair value of the division. Long-term assets are understated by 1 million, impairment expenses overstated by 1 million. This is a material issue at 2 times materiality. Lovely, so I've got a nice structure in here. These points have been fully developed. I've got a range of points. Very happy with that section. Let's then write up these actions for the auditor, and each of these is short, so I'm not going to have subheadings for these. I'm just going to write them up. So we'll discuss the required disclosures with management. The division should be disclosed an asset held for sale, and the non-adjusting subsequent event over disposal of the division should be disclosed too. We'll suggest that management make the required changes, both to disclosures and the asset write-down. Explain why these adjustments are required and the impact on the audit opinion if the adjustments are not made. We'll also report to those charged with governance, TCWG, as they may be unaware that financial reporting standards have not been followed. Those charged with governance can then encourage the finance director to make the required changes. Best practice this is, by the way, if I'm going to have some long-winded abbreviated thing, I write it out the first time and then have it in brackets, and then from that point onwards I can just use it in brackets. If you're short of time, you could just do TCWG. The marker's going to know what you're talking about, and it won't cost you too much in the way of credit with the marker. Right, implications for the audit report if no adjustments are made. These I'm just going to write up briefly, no subheadings required because they're all short points. So here those points are written up. There's a disagreement with management over the required financial reporting. Several matters have been incorrectly accounted for, leading to the accounts being misstated. there are multiple material issues, 2 disclosure issues and 1 profit understatement. This could be considered pervasive as several areas of the financial statements are impacted and the disposal is highly material by size. If considered material only, per the auditor's judgment, a qualified opinion, except for, will be given. Although if it's material and pervasive, an adverse opinion will be given, as the accounts are not true and fair. A basis of qualified or adverse opinion paragraph would be included in the report, explaining why the opinion has been modified. This should be placed immediately after the audit opinion. Great, so I've got more than enough in here for a 10-mark answer. I've demonstrated my professional skills by including some numbers and fully developing my points and answering the question. And I've been, this is a lovely development point, another analysis and evaluation point, and I've demonstrated some professional skepticism as well by explaining why I think that the disposal hasn't been disclosed. Okay, I hope you found that debrief useful. It's most useful if you have already attempted the question yourself. But hopefully through watching that debrief, you've picked up some useful exam technique skills. And if you compare my answer there to the examiner's published answer for this paper, my answer is about half the length of the examiner's answer. But it's packed full of content. So we're going to do a bit of a marking exercise now that is based around that same question that we've just seen, but is going to. Oh, I'm going to stop this video because it's going to play again. Right, let's get rid of that. So I'm in control. Rita, you don't need to touch anything. I've got it all. We'll be we're going to be doing this marking exercise where we are. Where we're going to go through a couple of student scripts from this from this particular paper. But before we do that, you should be able to see on screen now the technical marking scheme for this paper, for this question, and you'll see it says 10 marks down the bottom, but actually there are 16 marks available here. And that's quite typical in AAA. You don't need to write everything that's in the marking scheme or in the model answer to score full marks. Now, I'm just going to give you a minute to read down this marking scheme. And I want you to pick out any points that I didn't make in my answer. Right, so I'm just going to give you 30 seconds or so to go down it and go, did Ben miss any of these? And I definitely missed some, didn't I? So I missed this point. I didn't write out the disclosure rules. Okay? I could have written out all of the criteria around it being an asset held for sale to earn a mark, and I didn't. Now, why do you think I didn't? Well, for me, it's about time. Yeah, to write out all those rules would take me quite a lot of time to earn 1 mark. So I just picked the bits that were relevant to my answer. I also didn't make this point. I didn't set out all of the detailed criteria about it being an asset held for sale. I missed that as well, again, to save time. Don't have time to do everything. And I didn't make that point as an action. Obtaining written management representations is quite often a good action for the auditor, regardless of what the question is, as long as you are specific about what those representations are over. So here it's confirming their intent to proceed with the financial statements as they are currently standing if they refuse to make my adjustments. On the professional skills marks, oh, this is going through again, I don't know why. Here we go, the professional skills marking scheme. So there are professional skills here, marks for analysis and evaluation and skepticism and judgment. And I just wanted to highlight one of the points that's on here. You have to take into account the stage of the engagement that we're at. So your auditor's actions need to reflect here that we were at completion rather than earlier in the audit process where we're still at the audit testing phase. I didn't do all of these professional skills. I didn't have that one. There was nothing in there where I said there's something missing, or I could do some extra analysis here that would give me some more information. And we're seeing that in quite a lot of the marking schemes that ACCA have published for the professional skills, identifying where something's missing. So that's, if you've got a bit of spare time at the end of the exam, you probably won't, but if you do have a bit of spare time at the end of the exam, that's a good thing to go back and do. Right, we're going to mark this student. We've got 2 student scripts to mark. We're going to go through and grade these together. So I'll just give you 30 seconds to run down this section of student script 1 and decide how many marks you think would be awarded here. Okay, now that first paragraph is earning a mark for the calculation of materiality and the conclusion that it is material. Although you don't really need to do both calculations, you could just do the PBT one. That would probably be the better of the 2. Then look, this student did the thing that I didn't do. They wrote out all of the rules around assets held for sale. Look how much they had to write to earn 1 mark. Was that an efficient way to earn credits, or is that a recipe for running out of time in the exam? Here, an analysis and evaluation mark, a professional skills mark for their conclusion that the conditions are met. Okay, next section of this script. This is the same answer, just the next part of it. So I'll just give you a chance to read this and decide how many marks you think would be awarded here. Okay, the first paragraph is only going to score half a mark. Right? They're correct that they've picked out this disclosure risk, but they haven't fully developed their point. They haven't gone on and said disclosures may be inadequate. If they'd gone on and said disclosures may be inadequate, that half mark would become a full mark. Look how different the second point is though, right? So they've pulled out the issue and analysed it and gone on and said that assets are understated and expenses and profits are overstated. This one earns a full mark. This answer is better than the one that I just showed you because it goes on and fully develops, excuse me, it goes on and fully develops its point to earn a full mark. And in this final point here, actually this one earns several marks. There's a mark here for the discussion and conclusion around the value in use versus fair value, less cost to sell. There's also a half mark for doing the calculation. Goodness me, that's an easy calculation, isn't it? 42 minus 41, the difference is 1 million. You're going to get half a mark for that, and another mark for concluding that it's material. So this third paragraph is showing you can actually earn lots of marks in the same paragraph. Right, what about these audit procedures? How many, because the question asked for actions, didn't it? Actions for the auditor. But this student has said audit procedures to be performed. How many marks do you think would be earned here? Have you come to the same conclusion that I have? No marks! Goodness me, that's harsh. Loads of these audit tests are great audit tests. They've been well explained. But this happens so often in AAA. If you slightly misunderstand the question, you can write a great answer that doesn't answer the question that's been set. and it scores nothing. The actions the auditor needed to take here needed to be actions at the completion phase. We've already done all of the audit testing. So all of this work's already been done. So there's no need for the auditor to go back and do it again. Right, on to implications for the auditor's report. So if you can go down this and decide how many marks you think would be awarded. Right, let's go through it together then. That first point doesn't score anything. It's a general introduction point, doesn't get anything. The risk of material, so it's not saying they are materially misstated, it says risk of material misstatement. That's not enough. The second point here earns a mark for an action for the auditor. They should be discussing with those charged with governance. And they've concluded it's a material but not pervasive issue, and so that scores a mark for that conclusion. Saying that it's a qualified audit opinion, half a mark. Saying that it's a basis for qualified opinion paragraph needs to be included, another half mark. And saying that this will, actually this is better than my answer here, because they've said quantify the financial effect of the misstatements and present the matters, and it follows after the qualified opinion. That whole sentence there scores a full mark. So lots of credit earned in that paragraph. And an analysis and evaluation mark here for the fact that they've concluded about what the audit opinion should be. This is an example of double marking. They're getting half a mark here for saying what the audit opinion should be, and a mark for having had a conclusion about what the audit opinion should be. Double bubble, great. At this point here, discussing the matters with management is too vague. It needs more. What are you going to discuss? For example, the impact on the audit opinion if they don't make the adjustments. And this one, well, this is using the word if a little bit too much. If the matters would be updated, we'd give an unmodified opinion, but that's speculating, so we don't score any credit for that. Right, so this script absolutely nailed it. Right? It wasn't perfect. The actions for the auditor were weak. Because they were at the wrong, but they still scored 10 out of 10 for the technical marks, and they picked up 2 professional skills marks too. What they did really well is they used the scenario well, and they demonstrated strong technical knowledge and applied that technical knowledge to the question. But the big weakness of that script is that that procedures section ignored the phase of the audit that the student was at, or that the question was set at. Right, second student script. This one's a bit shorter, so it won't take us quite so long to mark. So I'll just give you a minute to read down this section of the script and decide how many marks you think would be awarded. Right, first paragraph. This is going to score 1 mark because they've concluded about the materiality of the issue. The sales price is clearly material. It would have been better if they'd added, you know, the percentage versus profit before tax or assets or revenue, but it's still good enough to earn a mark. This second paragraph, for the discussion about it being an asset held for sale and using some of the information in the scenario to make a conclusion about it being held for sale, that earns a mark. And the third paragraph here is only going to score half a mark. They should really be comparing the 42 to 41 and saying there's a misstatement of one, and setting out the rule about the lower of value in use versus the resale value of the operation. So only half a mark there because it wasn't developed enough. And across these 2 paragraphs, and actually on the next paragraph we're going to come to, they're getting at a bit of professional skepticism. Okay, they are kind of commenting. This one's a bit generous, right? You might not have awarded this, But across these two paragraphs and the next paragraph that we're going to see, this is the holistic awarding of marks. They are just about questioning things enough to get a professional skepticism mark. So for this this first paragraph as well, that professional skepticism mark is across all three. I'll just give you a chance to mark the rest of this page, and then we'll go through it together. Right, the first point there is going to earn a mark because they are doing that extra bit of evaluation about comparing fair value and value in use. The second point here about disclosures, that is not going to score any credit because we don't know whether they've disclosed it or not. Well, look at this impact on the audit report. They're only going to score half a mark because they've just concluded that it's a qualified except for opinion. They're not going to earn the professional skills mark for that conclusion because they haven't set out what has led them to that conclusion. They didn't go through the earlier steps. So that doesn't earn the professional skills mark that the first script did. You have to go through explaining why you're getting to that conclusion for you to earn that analysis and evaluation professional skills mark. Okay, so this script, much weaker. It scores 4 out of 10 for the technical marks and 1 for the professional skills marks. So this one is a borderline fail on this question. The reason it fails, it didn't develop its points fully, didn't answer all of the requirements, so it didn't have a section for actions for the auditor. You saw in my debrief that I set up a structure to make sure I answered all parts of the question. This student didn't do that and therefore missed out a big chunk of the question. But maybe that's because they were running out of time. Okay, this was question 3 on the paper. And what very often happens to students who start at question 1 is that they run out of time when they get to question 3 and they miss out on the easier marks that would be available on those later questions. My advice to you is consider about which order you do the questions in. If you start with question 1, that's the one where it's hardest to manage your time. And it can often hurt you later in the exam paper. For a lot of students, it's better to start with question 2 and question 3. Right, a few free resources for you that are going to help you in these final stages of your exam preparation before we go on and do that Q&A session. So definitely read the examiner's reports that are available on the ACCA's website, particularly the June exam paper. That one's just been released, the June 22 exam paper. That was a really tough sitting. The overall pass rate was 31%, and it gives you lots of reasons why students scored so low. Do the 4 practice tests that are available on the ACCA's practice platform. Okay, so you've got 2 that are called practice tests. You've got 1 that is called the specimen exam, and you've got 1 that's called the pre-September 22 mock event. Those are all fully updated for the new professional skills marks. I'm going to just show you, I'm going to put a link actually in the attendee chat so that you can get to all of my resources that are available for free. I have a free podcast where I discuss a real world event from an auditing perspective. And the idea is that it brings the subject matter to life a bit more. I had loads of comments after the March exam paper that the recording I did, the podcast that I did that was all about money laundering. Actually, there was a question that came up in the March exam paper that my podcast was really, really helpful for. So I had literally hundreds of messages from students afterwards saying, thank you for that podcast. It was so helpful for the exam. There are loads of videos on the ACCA's YouTube channel. So some of those I've recorded, and there are some others on there too that have come directly from ACCA. On my YouTube channel, I've got lots of debrief videos and also some professional skills videos too, and a video about what's new in AAA for the 22 exam sitting, which you'll find helpful. I would subscribe to both ACCA's YouTube channel and mine because we both release more videos in the run-up to the exam. And if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I put lots of useful exam technique tips up on there, and I do audit quizzes as well, which will be helpful. Okay, that's it for the formal part of the presentation. So we're going to then now go through some of the questions that people have submitted. And we've got about just over 20 minutes to go through these questions. If you have any further questions you would like to ask, please put them in the Q&A box, and I'll do my best to answer as many as I can in the time we have available. So the first question I've had was from Kalavani, asking about for resitters. So if you're a resitter, is there much that you need to do that's different in the way you answer questions compared to the past? Because Kalavani's made the point that a lot of the model answers haven't really changed much. And the answer is, Kalavani, most of the paper, there's still, you're answering the technical questions in the same way as you were previously, right? So most of it isn't that different, but there are a few different parts. There are a few extra things you need to do to get these professional skills. So for example, in question 1, you need to prioritize your audit risks. So your biggest two need to come first, and you need to explain why they're your most significant audit risks. They've also made a significant change to the way they expect you to calculate materiality in question 1. Now we are told how to calculate the materiality, and we're supposed to calculate a benchmark range, so like 5 to 10% of PBT, and then discuss where we're going to fix the materiality level at either the low, in the middle, or at the high end based on the facts that are in the scenario. So it's subtly different, I would say, Kalavani. I would also be adding more conclusions in, because there's now more credit available for concluding. Anytime it's an evaluation question, I would be writing a conclusion. Andre has asked, if we're evaluating business risks, audit risks, or risks of material misstatement, what's the main difference? So, business risks are for the company. In a business risk, you have to take a fact from the scenario and explain why that fact means that the company might struggle to trade effectively. They might struggle to reach or to hit one of their strategic goals. It might impact a key performance indicator that the business really focuses on. So we take it for a business risk, we take a fact or facts from the scenario and explain why they're going to harm the performance of the company going forward. For an audit risk or a risk of material misstatement, it's completely different. Here, we're always saying this number might be wrong in the financial statements and explaining why that number might be materially incorrect. Okay, so business risks problem for the company, audit risks and risk of material misstatement, we're explaining why a number in the accounts might be wrong. Rupal has asked, sitting 2 exam papers together in September, AAA and APM, and work pressures as well, meaning that there's just not enough time to do enough study. Now, doing 2 papers together stretches you. Okay? And it's a bit late now for me to give you this advice, Rupal, but at this level of the qualification, what I often find, because I work with loads of resit students for AAA, the majority of the students that do my course, my Revision Plus course, have tried somewhere else, not managed to pass the exam, and they want to get a more supported approach. Now, a lot of those students have tried doing 2 together, and they end up failing both. And then going, right, well, I'm going to focus on one at a time now. I'm just going to do AAA, and then in the December sitting, I'll just do APM. And by allowing them to focus on just one paper, not spreading themselves too thin, give themselves a better chance of passing. But it's too late for that advice. So given that you are doing 2 papers together, to give yourself the best possible chance of passing, it's all about question practice. Okay? You've got to be particular for AAA, very much so. For APM, even more so. So I spent many years teaching APM. And the thing with APM is that you have got such a wide range of questions that could come up, and you have to have seen all the different question styles for you to be fully prepared. So Rupal, it's about assigning as much time as you can to question practice. For both AAA and APM, the knowledge is not that important. So don't spend time doing traditional rote learning and revising. spend your time on question practice. Namra has asked, this is my second attempt. What should I do differently? Right. So one approach is to change the order you do the questions. Right. Start with question 2, question 3 before doing question 1. Think about your approach to studying. So would you benefit from doing more mock exams? Would you benefit from getting some feedback on your answers? So perhaps you'd want to think about studying with a training provider if you didn't do so last time. It's really hard to self-prepare for this exam paper. It's such a tough paper. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to the questions. Everything froze and went. Fatima has asked, do you have to have a conclusion in question 1? Anytime that there is an evaluation question, you should have a conclusion. Okay, so yes, you should. Exam technique and time management. To help with time management, Martin has asked, he copies and pastes the requirements into the response area. Great technique, Martin. I do exactly the same thing. Is there a penalty? No way. Make that your subheadings. Yeah, so make it a subheading. That's absolutely fine. Ross, are the professional marks a set amount or are they randomly split between each skill? Oh, Ross, great question. So we always know there's 4 for communication in section A. All of the others, we don't know how many marks there are. Okay, they're not telling us, and they won't tell us afterwards either. So we don't know how many marks there are available. So that's to allow them to, I don't know, gives them a bit more headroom in the way that they apply these skills marks. So we don't know how many there are. Pei Yi has asked, what are the most important areas for AAA? So the AAA exam is unbelievably predictable. Same things always come up. Risk will be half of question 1. Audit procedures and ethics. Those will always be in question 1. In question 2, you will always get, or question 2 or question 3, you will always get reporting. Okay? So it'll be some sort of audit reporting question, so that's really important. And then the third question will be on something on everything else, either like a due diligence engagement or a quality control review, something that comes at the completion phase of the audit. Kalavani has asked about, do you need to have a conclusion for each requirement in question 1 or just a conclusion at the end? I would have, if I've got time, I'd have a conclusion after every evaluation question. So if it asks you to evaluate the business risks and then evaluate the risks of material misstatement, I'd have a conclusion for each of those, and then an overall conclusion for the question. Nayab, how to deal with a question if we don't know how to answer it? Rely on your exam technique skills. Okay. My biggest bit of advice to you there is they will always tell you the answer in the requirement, in the scenario. The answers are in there, the facts are in there. So take some stuff from the scenario and evaluate it. Even if you're not directly answering the perfect question that's been asked, you may well pick up some credit. But if you genuinely don't know how to answer a question, my advice would be leave it out entirely, do the rest of the exam paper, and then come back to that question. Okay, who's next on the list? So Ibrahim has asked, are there any specific guidelines to answer questions on audit procedures? Yes, there are, Ibrahim. So on audit procedures, you start with a fact from the scenario that you're trying to verify, specific fact. You suggest a source document, and then you explain why this test is helpful. So, for example, if they tell you that they've bought some machinery for $10 million, the fact is $10 million. Right? So we'll verify that $10 million was the amount that was paid by agreeing it to the bank statements. That's my document. And that will confirm the accuracy of the $10 million figure. But always follow that approach. You've got a fact from the scenario, a document, and an explanation. Andre's asked, material and pervasive, what's the difference? So material is that it's over the materiality threshold, so over 5 to 10% PBT. Pervasive means that this issue is really whopper, it's huge. So it might impact many, many, many places in the financial statements. That's one reason it's pervasive. So it could be all of the accounting records that have been destroyed in a fire. That would be a pervasive lack of evidence. Or if the issue is so big, it might be isolated to one area, but it might be so big that it turns profit to a loss or means that we breach a bank loan covenant. And in that scenario, it becomes pervasive as well. Okay, I'm going to go into the question inbox. Oh, no, I've had a couple more questions that have been put into my box. Okay. Benita has asked, how do you need to quote the IFRS numbers? No, you do not. Do you need to quote the whole accounting standard? No, you don't. Right, you need to just bring out the relevant part of the accounting standard. Josh has asked about materiality in Section A. If we are setting materiality out in Section A, where do you do it? And the answer is, it should be the first thing in your answer to the audit risk or risk of material misstatement section. So it comes at the beginning of your answer. How do you know whether to set it at 5% or 10%, so the low level and do more work, or the high level and do less work? You've got to use your judgment, Josh. You have to use the facts in the scenario to say this is particularly high risk, this audit, or particularly low risk. Now, so if we're really experienced with the client, we might say there's and nothing's really changed in the business, we would say we can have the higher level. There's less risk in the statement. Or if it's a new client for us and there's been massive changes during the year, we might set it at the lower level. There's a higher risk in the statement. The UK, oh, so Mohammed, you've asked, you're doing the UK syllabus. And can you use dollars instead of pounds? I'm imagining, Mohammed, that's because the keyboard you have has dollars on it rather than pounds. They're not. It would be incredibly harsh for them to mark you down for that, so I wouldn't worry about it. I'm sure that's fine. Nicholas has asked, do we need to quote ISAs and IFRSs? Absolutely not. The examiner does in their answer because it is a reference document. But in your answers, you're not expected to, and you won't get any credit for the numbers. Kieran's asked, what are the main IFRSs that come up for audit risk? It's an impossible question to answer that, Kieran, because everything is examinable, right? And you will get a broad range of audit risks. My advice to you with financial reporting stuff is to have a bit of an understanding about all of the accounting standards. You don't need to go back and be an SBR expert again, but you need to know, for example, for inventory, you need to know inventory is valued at the lower of cost and net realizable value. And that's probably enough for your AAA exam. So I would, and they don't tend to repeat the same standards coming up again and again, so it's not like you can say these. So my advice is go back over your SBR notes and give yourself like a 4 or 5 line summary of each financial reporting standard, and that should be enough for you. Mary's asked about new technical articles, as has Daniel, and the answer is yes, there has been a new technical article. Okay? It's on sustainability reporting. And so you can find that on the ACCA's website. It gives you a bit of a heads up about the challenges that auditors face around this area of ESG reporting, environment, social, and governance reporting. So it's worth reading that technical article. It's just been published, which means it's at the forefront of the examiner's mind. Yash has asked, will the knowledge question part still be part of question 1? Usually it's 4 to 5 marks for a knowledge question. Yash, unfortunately, my friend, I'm going to have to disappoint you here. There aren't going to be any knowledge questions in AAA. If you're seeing some old, if you're seeing questions that haven't, like, here's 5 marks for showing some knowledge, what you're doing there is looking at old questions, because the examiner doesn't really give any credit, doesn't ask those questions. Okay, I'm being asked about which questions from the exam kit to do. Do the most recent ones. So if you've got the Kaplan or the BPP exam kit, it tells you the date of the questions. The best ones are the most recent ones, and do a selection of questions across the whole different areas. Taro has asked, how do you prepare for current issues in this exam? Well, I don't do that much. So read the most recent technical articles, like that sustainability one, but they don't tend to say, there's an article, and can you tell me about the article? They'll do things like, they'll ask you a more applied question. So data analytics, there was a recent article on data analytics. And when it's come up in recent exam sittings, they don't say, can you tell me the definition of data analytics and what is it? They say to you, this company has got these issues. How could data analytics help them to solve their problems? Well, what challenges might this company have in applying data analytics in this given scenario? And you kind of need to know what data analytics is to be able to answer those questions. But the majority of it is exam technique, exam skill, taking facts from the scenario and applying your knowledge. Tin has asked, should you do 5 points for an 8-mark question? No. For an 8-mark question, you should have 8 points. Okay? AAA is, in virtually every question, it's 1 mark per well-explained point. So you are better to have 8 separate points and go for coverage, rather than trying to earn multiple marks for the same point. The only places in this exam where it's not 1 mark per well-explained point is in audit risk and risk and material misstatement. Those are 3 marks per well-explained risk. Business risk, which is 2 marks per well-explained point. And very occasionally, some of the other questions give you 2 marks per point. But there's no consistency in that. So my assumption, I always work on this assumption, every question is 1 mark per well-explained point. Martin has asked about materiality changes for the new format. What I'd suggest, Martin, because I'm not quite sure how to answer your question, I've got a video on my YouTube channel about the change in materiality. Okay, it's called What's New for 2022. So if you go on my YouTube channel, you can see a whole video on it. So it's Brad that asked this question. I've just put the link in the attendee chat, so there's a whole video on it for you. Okay, Manpreet has asked, for audit risk, the briefing note, do you copy the requirement over or do you rewrite it to look more like a professional report? Okay, Manpreet, what I do is I copy the to, from, date, subject bit from the partner's email. I copy and paste that into my answer. And then I just switch around the to and from, because you need to reverse those. And then for the rest of question 1, I copy and paste all the requirements in, and I do tend to shorten them down and break them out. So if there's multiple questions in one of the requirements, I break it out into 2 or 3 separate parts. Okay, Brad, I've just got to your question. Yeah, so that change is quite significant to the way materiality is calculated. But you will see it in on the What's New for 22 video on my YouTube channel. There's also it's called Confidence Booster on audit risk that shows you how to do it. Okay, Daniel has asked, if the auditor has stated an inconsistency with other information, the paragraph, the audit report, in that case, whether the other information paragraph will appear before the key audit matters paragraph. So first thing, Daniel, the order of things in the audit report, really, there's a little bit of credit awarded for that in the exam, but not very much. So I really wouldn't worry about it too much. But the key audit matters section is there to give a bit of extra detail to the user of the accounts, that they can understand the audit process. And that extra information is presented in its own section, which tends to come after any critical matters. So it comes after the audit opinion, it comes after an emphasis of matter paragraph, it comes after these other things. So you would tend to see, though, anything critical comes at the top. That's what I would learn, and anything less important. Okay, we are coming towards the end of the session, so my apologies that we've not been able to answer every single question that people have asked. But hopefully, I've picked out a good selection there that it was useful for you in the Q&A section. I hope you found this session useful, and from the comments in the attendee chat, I did. And I'd just like to wish you the very best of luck for the exam paper. I'm going to pass back over now to Risha, who's going to just close off the session.
Thank you, Ben. Hope I am audible, right?
You are.
Am I audible? Yeah, great.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I believe our students might have found this session very useful, and we are now running out of time, so we really need to bring this to close. So I would like to request everyone that, and to inform also that all those who have registered for this webinar, they will be getting an email with details of how they can listen to it again. And do refer to the resource section, which we have talked about, and pick all the important links that may be helpful during your exam preparation. With this, I would like to say a big, big thank you to Ben for being here with us and support our students with AAA paper. And thank you to all students for their participation. Wish you all the very best for your exams. Goodbye, everyone.